How's everyone doing today? Good afternoon. So we'll get started right away. My name is Antoine McDonald. I'm the librarian in the local history department, and we're very happy today to have Dan Schneiderman. Dan Schneiderman is the Eclipse Partnership Coordinator at the Rochester Museum and Science Center and one of the co-chairs of the Rochester Eclipse Taskforce. Currently, he is working towards making sure that everyone under the sun has a chance to experience the 2024 total solar eclipse. So give us a warm welcome for Dan.
So good afternoon. As I was warmly introduced, my name is Dan Schneiderman. I'm the Eclipse Partnership Coordinator, or at least I am for the next 16 days. We'll see what happens after that. I ask this question before every presentation. Has anyone here ever seen a total solar eclipse before? There is always one. And you will not want to miss out. How many people here have ever seen a partial solar eclipse? I am in that partial group as well. I have yet to see a total solar eclipse. I honestly can't wait for April 8th, not only because I've been working on it for years, but because, well, I can't wait to see one. So let's dive in. So we are just over 2 weeks from that total solar eclipse right here in Rochester. It will be on Monday, April 8th, 2024. And this is what it comes down to. Basically, when the geometry allows, the moon passes directly in front of the sun and casts a giant shadow onto the Earth. We just happen to be in that shadow. Admittedly, as I say giant shadow, it's about 115 miles wide, give or take, but it's still only about 1/1000th of the Earth's surface. It's a much thinner path than you think on a global scale. And then this is the view that we will have on April 8th. Now, what's missing from this photo? The sky is there. Clouds. We will hopefully not have any clouds on April 8th, 2024. Of other things to note here, of course, we have the moon covering the sun's disk. That outer glow that you see, that is the sun's outer atmosphere, or the corona. It almost looks like a velvet hole in the middle of the sky. You can even see a star showing up because it's just that dark out. There are different types of solar eclipses out there. There are partial eclipses when the moon, only partially covers up the sun. We had one here in Rochester back in 2017. That was a total solar eclipse elsewhere in the U.S., not for here. We also had one in 2021 where the sun rose over Lake Ontario, partially eclipsed. That was a gorgeous sight. There are annular eclipses, which the moon's orbit around the Earth changes its distance. There are times when it's further away and times when it's closer to us. When it's slightly further away, from our vantage point on Earth, it looks ever so slightly smaller. And because of that, when it moves directly in front of the sun, it doesn't completely cover it. This leaves that ring of fire, and that's when we have annular eclipses. There was one this past October in other parts of the U.S., and if you remember, we had one here in Rochester back in 1994. And then there's the total solar eclipse, when the moon is slightly closer to us, and from our vantage point here on Earth, it fully blocks out the sun's disk. To give you an idea, well, this is all possible due to some very lucky geometry. While the sun is about 400 times larger than the moon is 400 times larger than us. So if you were to go outside on a sunny day while wearing your eclipse glasses and look up at the sun, you'll notice that it's not as big as you would imagine. It's about the same size as the moon. To give you a better idea of how this works out in scale, you can, bring it down to something that would fit here. Imagine a 10-foot sphere as the sun. In scale, the Earth would be about 1 inch in diameter, and the moon would be 1/4 of an inch. You can almost see the Earth here, and then the moon you can't even see. the distance between the Earth and the Moon would be about 30 to 36 inches. The Sun to the Earth would be 1,074 feet, or about the distance between Park Ave and East Ave. And the reason why I can say that distance is, well, number one, we did the math, and then number two, we did it at scale. So at the RMSC, we actually were able to recreate the eclipse in size and in distance. So we have our 10-foot sun all the way in the back park behind the planetarium, and then that quarter-inch moon in front of the planetarium, completely blocking it out. So this is essentially what's happening on the day of the eclipse. There's another way to think about this. I want all of you to stick out your thumb and block out my head. Thank you for saying I'm doing a good job. Now, are you able to block out my head using your thumb? Perfect. You are recreating a solar eclipse, because while your thumb is not bigger than my head, it's a lot closer to you, so you're able to block it out. The exact same thing is happening during the eclipse, where my head in this instance would be the sun, your thumb is the moon, and then your eyes are the Earth. So why don't we see them more often? Well, technically, they happen about every 18 to 24 months somewhere on Earth. We even get solar eclipses in general, just partial eclipses, every 6 to 8 months somewhere on Earth. The average time for any given location to experience a total solar eclipse twice is between 375 and 400 years. There are outliers. Carbondale, Illinois, about 5 hours south of Chicago, they were in the center of the 2017 eclipse, and they're going to be in the center of the 2024 eclipse. Being able to see 2 total solar eclipses in your own backyard within 7 years is insane. Here in Rochester, our average is pretty good. It's only about 100 and 120 years. Cosmically, that's fine. Human scale, not as good. Now, the other reason why we don't see them, once a month is due to more geometry. And I'm going to let our new planetarium director, Jim Bader, show it off. So if we don't hear it, it is captioned. The gist of this video is that the moon's orbit is not on a, it's not perfectly going around us. It's on a slight tilt, about 5 degrees. So there are times when it goes above the Earth and below as it casts its giant shadow. But when everything lines up, that's when we look out and an eclipse can happen. So what will you actually see that day? Well, number one, you're going to see the moon blocking out the sun. That's going to be the big obvious thing. It's going to get dark out, but not quite midnight out. It's like a deep dusk. If you were to look on the horizon, it looks like a 360-degree sunset. You should be able to see a couple planets fairly easily. Jupiter and Venus will be fairly close to the eclipse. If you're at a high enough vantage point and don't have too much light pollution, there is even a chance that you could see Saturn and Mars. The brightest of stars will be visible. The one I want all of you to look for is Orion. Or, specifically, you'll probably be able to find Orion's belt, those 3 little stars that we tend to see this time of year. If you are looking for that, you're going to look in the exact opposite direction of the eclipse. So you're going to want to turn around for 2 seconds. And then we have the diamond ring effect and Bailey's beads. So the moon is not a perfectly smooth surface. There's craters and there's valleys, and because of this, in the last couple of seconds as the moon moves in front of the sun, light escapes through those craters and valleys, and it almost looks like light dancing on the edge of the moon. The diamond ring effect is that moment that we enter totality. It's almost this burst of light as we enter totality. When you think of a total solar eclipse, you probably think of this image. To give you an idea of what it'll actually look like, this is about that 2.5 hours condensed to less than 5 seconds. And a lot of graphics, you'll kind of see a little chunk of the moon being eating out the sun or blocking it out. It doesn't go horizontally across, it goes at an angle. So we'll almost get this like crescent shape before and after totality. Now, as I mentioned, it will get dark out. When you see photos online of eclipses, you'll probably see two different versions. You'll see photos with a filter, and you'll see photos without a filter. Now, just like your eyes, you need to protect your cameras and your phones when looking directly at the sun. So here on the left, with the filter, that is during the partial phases, or this is just seconds before we enter totality. The photo on the right is without a filter on a camera, and you can see, the sun is completely blocked out, except for that outer atmosphere, as we've mentioned, and it looks dark, but not quite midnight out. Now, you really won't notice it getting darker out until the last couple minutes before totality. And really, you won't notice it until the last couple, 30 to 60 seconds beforehand. When we are just about to enter totality, it all of a sudden becomes dark out very, very quickly. The exact same thing happens when we exit totality, and it suddenly becomes bright out. The sun, as we exit, is like an ice pick of light. And to give you an example, here is video footage from 2017 by our previous planetarium director, Steve Fentress, that he took in Gallatin, Tennessee. I'm going to fast forward a little bit, but one of my favorite things about this video is he's not aiming his camera directly at the eclipse. He's looking at the horizon, and he's watching how people react. This is the moments before we enter totality, and you can see it's getting darker fairly quickly. I am not playing this video sped up. This is happening in real time. It all of a sudden just got dark out. And I'm now going to fast forward a little bit to after totality, when it's all of a sudden going to get bright out very, very quickly. You'll start to notice it getting lighter and lighter right here. Yet again, not speeding up, this is in real time. It is very much the difference between night and day. Did you all see how quickly it just got brighter? That is the difference. Back here on Earth, the eclipse isn't just a visual experience, but a physical one as well. On average, the temperature drops by about 10 degrees. Animals and plants act as if it was nighttime. Birds back to their nests, cows back to their barn. One of my favorite bits from 2017 is that you could hear crickets in the middle of the day. Admittedly, it's early April. I don't expect to hear too many crickets. If it wasn't for this past snowfall, maybe, but probably not. You can also notice that the birds that you will hear in early afternoon as they are chirping and singing, they all of a sudden go quiet. If you were to look down at the ground in the 20 minutes before and after totality, your shadow becomes incredibly sharp. You might even notice shadow bands, which is just refraction from Earth's atmosphere and turbulence going on. But the main thing you'll notice is how eerily still it becomes. Yes, at the beginning of totality, You'll probably hear a massive cheer from your friends, from your neighbors, at every local viewing event. But then it kind of quiets down. Everyone's experience is a little bit different. Some people have that fight or flight response inside of them. Others have the hair on the back of their neck stand up. I've heard stories of people who started laughing, some who started crying, and others have even described it as everything melting away except for the sun, the moon, the earth, and themselves.
What about our pets?
For your pets, honestly, cats and dogs, they're not going to care. Your dog is going to be with you. Hopefully, they're just going to be happy to be with you. As long as they don't look up at the sun any day, I wouldn't worry about them on the day of the eclipse. Your cat might lose a sunspot. That's about it. And really, you're just going to be overcome by the sense of awe and wonder during it. Yes?
Is it okay to, if I'm wearing my Eclipse glasses,
Yes.
to look through my camera and take a picture of it, maybe on telephoto or something?
I recommend getting a filter for your camera for the before and after totality phases.
For my safety or just for the picture quality?
Both.
Oh, okay.
If you want to plan ahead, on the day of the eclipse, you're going to want to be looking about south-southwest, about 45 degrees up. I do want to point out at this point that really, on the day of the eclipse, as long as you're wearing your eclipse glasses, just look where the sun is. It's going to be very obvious that day. To give you an idea where Jupiter and Venus are, as I mentioned earlier, Jupiter is a little bit higher up on the horizon, a little bit more to the south. Venus is a little bit lower on the horizon, a bit more to the west. So, this question, the one that Rochester has been saying again and again and again for years. What happens if it's cloudy? Well, here's the thing. We have no control over the sun, the moon, the earth, or the weather. No matter what, this eclipse is going to happen, and it will still get dark out. In fact, it will feel noticeably darker if it is cloudy or overcast. But thankfully, there's a couple things working out in our favor. Now, if you were to look at historical data for the last 20 years, Rochester's not as bad as you would think, at least in comparison across the path of the eclipse. We are probably one of the last best places, probability-wise, for having clear skies on the East Coast. Cleveland is only slightly better than us, and then otherwise you have to basically go to Arkansas to get a better chance of no clouds. Yes, it does get a lot better in Texas and extremely better if you go to Mazatlan, Mexico, where there's only a 20% chance of clouds that day. Thankfully, Lake Ontario is very helpful for us, especially where we are with our microclimate. I want you to think about those days in the past year, a couple years, when our friends in Buffalo might get slammed with, 2, 3, 4, 5 feet of snow. And often when that happens, we barely get an inch. We are very, very lucky on where we are in Lake Ontario. And, I like to preface this slide by saying, yes, a single data point does not make a pattern, but this is a really nice data point. This is April 8th, 2023. If you're to look here, Rochester didn't have a cloud in the sky. It was 40 to 50 degrees, really sunny out. A lot of us were running around Rochester having fun. It was a lovely day. I also want to point out, for the most part, we've had an extremely mild winter. It was, 50, 60 degrees and sunny out last week, and it's looking like we're going to get a few more of those days coming up. It's a very unusual year. We've also had clear, sunny days over the past decade, if not on April 8th, near April 8th, within the region. All of that being said, well, if you're to look at the last 50 years of data, not necessarily in our favor, but I would combine the clear and partly cloudy with the mostly cloudy numbers. And there's a reason for that. And that's if you were to look at a lot of eclipse viewing locations, as the moon covers up more and more of the sun and the temperature drops, a lot of our clouds dissipate. As long as it's not fully overcast, you'll see a lot of clouds disappear at the last moment. And there's some really good footage of this from 2017. This is Homestead National Monument. There was 20,000 people there. Bill Nye the Science Guy was there, which is probably why 20,000 people were there. And if you're to look in the background and at footage from earlier that day, thunderstorms, heavy rain. But I'm now going to, rotate the video. You can see it fairly dark out everywhere. It's a really cool 360-degree video. Now I'm going to skip ahead 2 minutes into totality. And if you look carefully, well, you can see how it's darker out, but you can also see at the last possible second, the clouds dissipated. And in a moment, you'll see the eclipse emerged. It's that little dot right there. The clouds just passed right in front of it again. But there it is. I want you to imagine what 20,000 people cheering, probably soaked to the bone, felt like. This could happen here in Rochester. Yes, we are known for having a lot of clouds, but there's something about eclipses that help us even that last little bit as a lot of the clouds dissipate. Let's take it a step back and look at an eagle-eye view of the eclipse. This is the official NASA map for the 2023 and 2024 eclipses. This here was the path for the annular eclipse, for which here in Rochester we really only got 25% of the sun covered up. And then here is the upcoming 2024 eclipse. To clean this map up a little, these are all of the main cities within the path of the eclipse. A lot of those cities down in Texas are cut in half. Literally, it goes through half of San Antonio and half of Austin, where they have to figure out exactly where they are standing. What I love about this map is you can see Cleveland, Buffalo, and Rochester are all fairly center in the path. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Here is New York State. Everywhere in between these two blue lines is in the path of totality. The closer you are to that red line, the longer it will be. If you were at SUNY Brockport, it goes right through their football field. They are very happy and very, very lucky. A couple things I love pointing out about this map. As I said, if you're in between those blue lines, you get to experience totality. I want you to think about how many people live in between those two blue lines. All of your friends, all of your neighbors, everyone you've driven by, everyone you see at schools, at the grocery store, complete strangers that pass you by every single day, and their friends, their families, their neighbors. Every single one of them in this region will get to experience a total solar eclipse. In that greater Rochester region, that is 1.1 million people that all get to look up and see it. Across New York State, it's about 3.75 to 4 million residents. For the entire path of the eclipse, about 30 million, and even if you were outside the path of the eclipse, you still get a good view in the continental US. About 350 million people in the US will get to see at least a partial eclipse. Everyone's going to be looking up that day. One of the other fun things I like pointing out on this map is what connects Cleveland, Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse? The thruway. If there's any place to not be that day, it's I-90. We'll get to that in a few. And to, kind of give you a rough idea, I have this pointed at the Rochester Museum and Science Center, but we are in a good place within the city. To give you an idea about how long totality will last here, it will start at about 2:06 p.m. and 58 seconds. It might be a second or different off from here to the RMSC, but honestly, I think it's probably closer to a half second. Totality will kick off at 3:20 and 6 seconds and will last for 3 minutes and 38 seconds. That is a minute longer than anywhere in 2017. A total solar eclipse can ever only be about 7 minutes long. And it is very dependent on where you are standing in the path. Then the whole thing ends at 4:33 p.m., when the moon is no longer covering up any bit of the sun. Now, I have been asked if you were to drive on I-90 and really push down on the pedal, could you keep up with the eclipse? The answer is very much no. That shadow travels from one end of the state to the other in the span of 11 minutes. It travels from about 22 to 2,700 miles per hour. Rockets can't even go that fast. It is wild how fast that shadow travels. Now, as I said a second ago, location very much matters. Here in the city, we have over 3.5 minutes. Perfect. But if you get close to that edge, well, it starts getting trickier. If you were in Lakeville, still get over 3 minutes. Canandaigua, it starts jumping down a little bit more at just under 3 minutes. It's like 2:50. Geneva, close to 2. Same for Cayuga. Naples jumps down to under 2 minutes, so just over 1.5 minutes. But Penn Yan, they are right on the edge. To give you an idea, I was at a presentation there back in December 2022. Where the presentation was in the path of totality. 5 minutes down the road, where their holiday party was outside the path. Location very much matters, and we're expecting a lot of people to come in from the southern part of the Finger Lakes that day. And part of that reason why is 99.9% coverage of the sun is not totality. During totality, you can actually remove your eclipse glasses and look directly at the sun. Mostly because the moon's in the way. But if you are outside the path of totality, you have to keep your glasses on anytime you look directly at the sun. To give you an idea, this is about 94-95% of the sun being covered. And here is 99.39% of the sun being covered. That small sliver of light could still damage your eyes if you aren't wearing eclipse glasses. It's only during totality when the sun's disk is fully covered can you actually look directly at it. Now, you can find a lot of good interactive maps out there. We promote them as often as we can. A little bit of history. There's one date I don't include up on here, but I love mentioning it. And that's, according to oral tradition, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy was founded under a total solar eclipse in modern-day Victor. Jumping ahead a couple hundred years, there was a total solar eclipse through Rochester back in 1806. The last time that we had one here in Rochester was in 1925. And one of my favorite bits from 1925 is if you were to look at the Democratic Chronicle from that morning, January 24th, 1925, in one small paragraph, they mention Rochester needing to get prepared in 2024. Technically, it says 2025. I personally think it was a misprint or just a off by one error. But they were talking about us today. Just wild. Yep.
Where did people gather at that time to see the eclipse? Do we have anything on record that can show us the sites where it occurred?
Yes. There was a lot of people at Highland Park, Cobb's Hill, and what is now the Pont de Rennes Bridge, which there's a lot of fun history around that.
I'm guessing they didn't have the eclipse glasses back
No, they didn't. They used smoke glass. And a few people, I have heard this happening, of using several layers of undeveloped film. I do not recommend this method, but it was done historically. The last total solar, well, before we mention 2017, there was an annular eclipse in 1994. Some of you might remember that eclipse. That one's a bit more documented. The last time that we had a total solar eclipse in the US was 2017. We only had about 69 to 70% here in Rochester. But let's look forward. In 2033, there will be a total solar eclipse in Alaska. In 2044, there's going to be one in Montana and the Dakotas. But the next major total solar eclipse in the US won't be till 2045, 21 years from now. The next time we have one in New York State, it hits more downstate, is in 2079. But for Rochester, we have a little bit of time to wait. The next time we have one is in 2144, 120 years from now. Basically, if a baby was born any time right now, their grandkid's kid, or more likely grandkid's grandkid, will get to experience that eclipse. That is wild. And like as I mentioned earlier before, not long on the cosmic scale, but oh, does it feel so much longer on the human scale. Now, a lot of you probably are seeing these numbers in the news, and I want to clarify what these numbers actually mean. There's about 300 to 500,000 people expected to be in the greater Rochester region on the day of the eclipse. That is not just the city, that is not just Monroe County, that is the entire 9-county area. It's also not people staying overnight, it's a lot of people coming in just for the day. As I mentioned earlier, those in parts of the Finger Lakes will not get to see totality, and they're going to want to come in. One of the best ways I've heard totality being explained, or staying at 99.9 versus going into totality, is if you were to say go to Walt Disney World and hang out in the parking lot and then turn right around, you basically miss out on that main experience. Now, for people who are wondering where people are coming from, if you were just to pull data for the Rochester Museum and Science Center Rock the Eclipse Festival, we started mapping out the zip codes. People are coming from all over the East Coast, the West Coast, and even some from Canada. What's not shown on this map is we even have a few people coming from England and across Europe. To zoom in a little bit, it really is that Philly, DC, Boston, New York City region that's all coming up for the eclipse. And as I said before, this is just our data. This doesn't include the hotels, this doesn't include any of the other festivals in the area, and this is just people who have bought as of a week ago. I'm often asked why the eclipse is important, and first wearing my museum hat, oh, this is a great chance to talk about science, get people to look up at the sky, to actually perform some science. There's that tourism aspect. I get to brag about Rochester to a lot of national media and everything that goes on in this region. And of course, that then leads to a whole economic impact. But there's a whole nother part. Almost every religion and culture has some connection to eclipses. There are even prayers out there dedicated to the eclipse. There is different mythology, often of animals swallowing the sun and spitting it back out. You can find it all over pop culture, from Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court to Little Shop of Horrors, and yes, even Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart, which I cannot wait to not hear that song. I hear it on a way too often basis. But my favorite thing is this is one of those rare positive shared experiences. We've gone through a lot of negative ones where we've just all gone through those negative experiences all at once. But how many positive shared experiences can you say that millions, if not hundreds of millions, got to experience together? There are so few times where we can say everyone was looking up and cheering. this is just one of those great positive moments. And it really is different for everyone. Through this job, since my entire job is just the Eclipse, I've chatted with daycares to senior centers, manufacturers to universities, every type of business, chocolatiers, breweries, wineries, distilleries, bakeries, literally everyone. It's kind of led to this phrase that everyone under the sun is a stakeholder in this, because one way or another, we're all going to be impacted. One of my favorite things to kind of come out of the news this past week is even Wegmans is closing for a half hour so all of their staff and employees can experience the eclipse. When they announced that, we were, wow. Honestly, our jaw was on the floor this past week at the museum. That was just incredible news to see. To talk, yes.
Are schools closed too?
I'm going to get to that in a second. Speaking of impact, traffic is going to be a lot of fun that day. As I've shown you, a lot of people are coming in from outside the area. We're expecting, because it's going to be break week leading into it and Easter's 8 days beforehand, there should be more of a trickle in. But if you were to look at 2017 data, right after Totality, people said, wow, I can't believe I got to experience this. This was worth every second of driving here. You can find reports of people traveling 10, 11 hours just to get into the path of Totality. And afterwards, they then said, let's go home. Start multiplying that by tens of hundreds of thousands of people. And the U.S. saw some of the worst traffic that we've ever seen. Carbondale, Illinois, that I mentioned was 5 hours south of Chicago, became 12 hours on the way back. A lot of traffic, just increased because people immediately left. And here's where it becomes a little bit tricky in our region. If you go east or west, Buffalo and Syracuse are also in the path, and they have people leaving right after Totality. You can't go north because you run into a lake. So what does that leave? It leaves south and every other back road. Thankfully, one of the things that we've been working on in lessons learned from 2017 was to decentralize as much as possible, and you can find Eclipse events everywhere to try and spread people out as much as possible and getting people to stay local. A big part of this was schools. We started this conversation back in 2019 about what to do with schools. 3:20 p.m. is a common time for schools to get out. Well, you don't want kids to be stuck on a bus during the eclipse. A, they're going to miss out, and B, I can't imagine a bus driver pulling off to the side of the road, getting all the kids off the bus, wearing their glasses at the proper time, then getting them back on the bus, and continuing on with their route. We also don't want kids stuck in school. A number of schools back in 2017 didn't allow any of their staff or students out to view the eclipse, and we also didn't want them to be stuck there because of that traffic. So after a lot of work, every school in the entire 9-county region has off that day. And I can now say every school because only in the past week did that final school district say that they were taking off that day. Let's talk about safety. I'm kind of curious, does everyone here have their glasses yet? Good chunk of you? If not, after this talk, please go up to the circulation desk and get your glasses. 2 per household, correct? Awesome. So the reason why you should wear these Eclipse glasses is, number one, they block out just about everything. They block out 99.9% of light. You might only be able to see the brightest of light bulbs through these glasses. Sunglasses do not work. They are nowhere near strong enough. If you put on your Eclipse glasses and you don't see anything, congratulations, they're probably working. You also want to make sure that you get your glasses from a legitimate place because back in 2017, a lot of fake glasses were sold online. We've already seen this in 2024. If you ever have any questions, double check the American Astronomical Society the AAS on their Eclipse website. They have all the proper manufacturers listed. If you got your glasses at the library, you're good. This isn't the only method to view an eclipse. There's also pinhole projectors. A lot of you might think of that cardboard box, usually a cereal box where you poke a hole and you can aim it correctly. This isn't the only way to do this. You probably have other pinhole viewing devices in your kitchen. If you have a colander, those are some of my favorite pinhole projectors. In fact, this image is from 2017 and a pinhole projector being used. You can see the partial phase with the moon blocking out the sun. The trick with this is you do not want to hold your colander up to the sun and look through it. That's still you looking through the sun. You want to hold it down to the ground and look at the projection underneath. I recommend having a white sheet of paper underneath it. This same effect can also be replicated by using your hands by interlocking them and looking down. You can look at the shadows between the leaves on the trees, though at this rate, I would say probably not. If you have evergreens, maybe. You can also replicate this with crackers, including Ritz crackers and saltines, because they have small little holes in them, and you can get the same effect. Plus, you have a nice little snack afterwards. If you are looking for glasses still, please go to all of our local libraries. Some are not giving them out until the day of the eclipse. Others are, please check with your local library first. You can also still find them at the Rochester Museum and Science Center. Trust us, we bought 500,000 pairs of Eclipse glasses. And we ended up buying another 50,000 more. And I am happy to say this past week, word finally got announced. Every student and staff member as part of the Rochester City School District is getting a pair of glasses. They have started to distribute them on Friday, and most of the distribution is happening early this upcoming week. Here are some of those other methods that I mentioned, using your hands, a slotted spoon, a colander. I've even seen people use pegboard or even hole punches and index cards to spell words out.
It's important to have your glasses on, even if you're doing it with these other methods.
As long as you're not looking directly at the sun, you don't have to have the glasses on. So with these, you aren't looking directly at it, but you're having the light go through the device and looking at the shadow underneath. If you have access to a 3D printer, which a lot of our libraries do, you can even print out this New York State-shaped Eclipse pinhole viewer. And here's what our glasses look like. And yet again, if you see anyone using sunglasses during the eclipse, please go over to them and kindly say, don't use these. The more people we have going out there and telling people, the better. If you are going to have a group of you, either at your own personal viewing event or a whole bunch of you like at a neighborhood, couple event tips. I'm not going to go through everything. Number one, please turn off your automatic lights. They will turn on. This could be your garage light, garden lights, any of that. It gets that dark out that those will automatically turn on. I recommend, of course, you have backup plans for weather. There are lots of live streams going on by NASA and other big news organizations. They're the people who can bring in the big names. I do recommend having different playlists available. There's a lot of music out there related to the eclipse or the sun, the moon, the earth, the stars, all of that. Please have a dedicated timekeeper at your viewing location, even if it's just like 3 of you. But having a dedicated person saying when to take your eclipse glasses off for totality and when to put them back on is extremely useful. You want to make sure that you have that dedicated person to say, okay, now we can safely do this. Okay, the totality is about to end. You should put your glasses back on. And then really, at the end of the day, I want you to think about who you are with and where you are for the eclipse, because you will always remember those 2 things. If you can be with friends and loved ones, please do that. you will always remember that moment during totality of, the people you care about, if you're next to them, if you're with your friends. I personally will be next to my wife and holding my daughter during totality. And I encourage everyone to get that experience as well. Talking about different events, I do want to point out that there's going to be a viewing event right here at the RMSC. We have a festival taking place all weekend. There's lots of activities. We even have an astronaut coming out that weekend, which will be tons of fun. Lots of scientists. We're talking about history, even performing arts. Just a ton going on. I also want to mention that there's going to be a free shuttle around the city that weekend. On Saturday and Sunday, that shuttle is going to hit the East End Garage and the South Ave Garage, along with the George Eastman Museum, Memorial Art Gallery, Rochester Museum and Science Center, and the Strong National Museum of Play. So you can go and hop between festivities all weekend long. On the day of the eclipse, we're even including the public market as part of our shuttle plans. I also want to point out, the garage right next door is also a quick, easy walk to that South Ave garage. And of course, a quick shout out to all of our sponsors. Now, we're not the only event in town. The Rochester Red Wings are actually going to be renamed to the Rochester Moon Rocks, for which they've been doing a lot of great work helping get the message out about the eclipse. They're not playing on the day of the eclipse. They have several games that weekend, but Innovative Field is still going to be available. Almost every park, every rec center, a lot of our libraries are all taking different approaches to viewing the eclipse. The Genesee Country Village and Museum, they're taking a 19th century, where they're even bringing in some of the older telescopes that would have been available back then. And if you were to count up all of the events, this isn't even close to all of them. We have well over 120 events going on across the greater Rochester region, including at a lot of the local restaurants, at schools, performances. And, speaking of performances, there's a lot going on. The RPO is doing a concert the night before at the Blue Cross Arena. The Calkins Road Middle School they've written a whole musical just around the eclipse. It premiered back in February, and they're bringing it back in 24 hours beforehand. I love pointing out what Genesee County did. Genesee County early on realized that they could go into the pun, Jenna, see the eclipse. They went full out on this pun and even wrote a kid's book around it. So there's just so much to see. There's something for everyone from 5Ks to, I want to say the most Western New York eclipse viewing experience I've heard of is a euchre tournament taking place. There is a lot of artwork that has been developed for the eclipse. You might have seen these posters around town. Even here at the library a couple months ago, there was even this traveling art exhibit by artist and astronomer Tyler Nordgren. He's out of Ithaca. He's basically in our own backyard, which is perfect. But not only has he done eclipse artwork for Rochester, but he's done it for our region, for the state. He does state park posters, national park posters. He's done work for NASA, and he even has work in the Smithsonian. And, I just love his Erie Canal poster, the Finger Lakes poster, Wayne County, and even this New York State poster that highlights everywhere from Niagara Falls all the way through the Adirondacks. Quick note about Niagara Falls, it will be, the eclipse will be right over Horseshoe Falls. NASA's going to be there. I think the Canadian Space Agency is going to be there. I cannot possibly imagine how expensive Maid of the Mist tickets are going to be that day. It's going to be crazy over there, but it's going to be quite the view. Now, if you are looking for more details, we have a lot of information on RochesterEclipse2024.org. We have a countdown on that page that goes until totality. So at least totality at the RMSC. Please make sure to note the difference in seconds. I am not the only one working on this. The Rochester Museum and Science Center isn't the only ones working on this. There's been this core group that has been building up this giant task force since about 2018, 2019. and it's made up of the RMSC, the Genesee Transportation Council, Visit Rochester, and Deb Ross from Kids Out and About. And this core organization has kind of brought as many people in as possible, including the libraries, the parks, different government levels, artists, community groups, students, event organizers, literally everyone. And we have had over 700 people who have participated in our meetings over the last couple of years. And if you want to stay informed, you can find us on social media. You can also, at this point, just turn on any news station and you'll hear all about the eclipse. We are just so close to April 8th. It's hard to go anywhere in the region without running into more information about the eclipse. And with that, I want to say thank you all for coming out this afternoon. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Question?
It would be safe to take a selfie of myself with the sun back. I wouldn't be looking, I mean, with wearing glasses, but I wouldn't be.
Yes, just be careful about your phone's camera. Just like any other day, I don't recommend pointing your phone directly at the sun without a little protection on it for too long, because it can physically hurt your camera. It can overload the sensors inside of it. But for a quick selfie, yeah, you can probably get away with it.
In terms of my safety, that'd be okay.
Yes.
Because I'm not even looking.
Yeah.
Did you say the sun will be visible in the southwest?
Yes, I can bring up the map again. The southwest was more of the 2017 eclipse and the 2013 eclipse. 2023 eclipse. Let me jump back. It's this one. So it does hit Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, a smidge, a little bit of Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, a smidge of Pennsylvania, and continues on.
So, I was just thinking, probably the best place to see it will be somewhere up high.
You don't have to be up high. Honestly, as long as you are in the path of totality, you're in the best spot already. If you are at a higher vantage point, sometimes you can actually see the shadow rapidly approaching you.
Thank you.
Yep.
What was the last name of the Eclipse-based artist who did the familiar?
Nordgren.
Say again?
Nordgren. Here, I'll bring up his name again. There we are. Yeah.
I was thinking of going to Hammond Beach State Park because it's so open and they have so many hundreds and hundreds of parking spaces. Does that seem like a reasonable place to go?
Yes, but be ready for the crowds there.
Even there,
Especially there.
especially there. Okay.
Because that is closer to the center line.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are going for those few extra seconds. In fact, a couple weeks ago, there was a bunch of articles about Hamlin, Parma, and SUNY Brockport getting 5 seconds over the city. 5 seconds more of totality compared to the city.
Okay. My alternate plan is I know a few country roads that no one uses, they're just farms on it, and it's wide open sky, and I'm gonna probably go there instead.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about the celebrations at the Rochester Museum Sunset? Because my understanding that some of it is free and some you purchase a ticket. So can you share with us?
Yes. So the way that we've set it up is if you want to go into the main museum or the planetarium, it's normal membership prices. All members are completely free for the festival. We do ask that you register ahead of time. Otherwise, it's $20 per day. On the free section, our main stage all weekend, so we have one stage inside the Eisenhardt Auditorium, which is kitty corner to the museum entrance. That's where all of our big name speakers are. Dr. Phil Plate. That's where Kate Larson, the groovy geologist, and a lot of our talks are. We have some exhibitors out that area. We have food trucks that are completely free. Every telescope's going to be widely available. And on the day of the eclipse, our main stage is completely outside behind the planetarium, and that's where the main majority of content is. We wanted to do a mixture of both, but still be able to cover our cost. If you're curious, we are doing planetarium shows every half hour. We are powering through those. We also have singing Tesla coils that play music, and it's all going to be eclipse related. And those are every hour. Only reason we can't do it more often is due to physical limitations on how hot the device gets and needing a cool-down period. Can't fight material science.
Another question about safety. If you're looking with your eclipse glasses on,
Mm-hmm.
the very beginning of the eclipse and the whole thing, is it possible to look too long, or is it really safe?
If you're wearing eclipse glasses and looking directly at the partial phases for the entire time, I wouldn't say it's 100% safe, mostly because your neck is going to be really, really sore. So it's not necessarily the eye, but more of the tilting your head up for a long period of time.
I just wanted to mention, I have a friend who's organizing an event at Genesee Valley Park for people who are visually impaired. And she did this because in 2017 eclipse was very hard for her emotionally, that she couldn't experience something like everyone else did. So I just wanted to mention, if anyone knows anyone
Oh,
visually impaired, there's going to be like sensory exhibits, nature, and stuff like that as well.
we're doing a lot of that. We've actually worked with them heavily. We've been helping lead some of the accessibility where we brought light sound devices to the region. We did a make-a-thon back in 2022 to produce 50 of those devices to help out the region and outside the area. I know we have them connected to RIT. We've provided some of the tactile maps, and we have some additionally at the museum, along with a few other additional NASA-based touch maps and different science explanations. One of our big initiatives out of the RMSC for the last couple of years is to make the eclipse as accessible as possible. We have this whole ambassador program where we brought in 50 organizations. That organization, Seek, and the XCATS First Robotics teams, both of them were our ambassadors. We made sure all of them had telescopes, filters, 1,000 glasses to give away, and we even paid all of those organizations for their hard work as well. We wanted to make sure that everyone, that there was viewing sites everywhere. I think we've accomplished that with as many viewing sites as there are in the region. There's also telescopes now at every rec center in the city, along with filters and glasses.
There'd be some long lines to look at it, I suppose.
There is ways to speed it up that we've taught them.
I came in a little late, so I don't know if you're saying something about if you're close to a lake, it won't be.
Lake Ontario's, it depends on which lake. Lake Ontario, perfectly fine. It's parts of the Finger Lakes that it gets tricky because that's closer to the edge line. If you're up against Lake Ontario, honestly, you're perfect. I know people who are even going on boats into the water. Yeah, there's people who are trying every different possible view. Any other questions? I will say I'll be here for a few minutes afterwards in case anyone wants to ask me one-on-one. With that, thank you all so much.